Sound is the first honest thing in a room. Sight makes promises. Sound pays the bills. I wake to the slow breath of the air vent and the electric tick of the thermostat, and the soft weight of Atlas curled at my shins like a black comma. The house has a voice I know better than most people. Cabinet hinge on the left sings a tired note. Refrigerator hum leans low until the compressor shifts, and then it climbs a half step like a singer finding a key. Pipes click once before the shower starts to run. I count those clicks. 1, 2. Today the second click takes longer, and I file that away with the weather and the list of small repairs that mark a life held together by hands. I am Lucas. Austin is the city that holds me. The sun will arrive later with its brass trumpet. For a moment I let the quiet pretend it will stay. Atlas stretches and thumps his tail once. The tag on his collar taps the floor and gives me the beat of the room. Coffee comes next. Grinder speaks gravel. Kettle breathes. I lay out 2 mugs by habit and then correct myself. Camilla left early to open the studio, or that is what she told her phone last night. The smell of her shampoo drifts in a way that tries to tell me she's still here. It is a loyal smell. It takes longer to learn the truth than my hands do. I put 1 mug back in the cabinet and touch the Braille label on its shelf. I place that label a thumb width in from the edge. It is now flush to the edge. Someone rearranged my order after midnight. I do not say anything to the empty room. I press the kettle button and Atlas listens to my silence. Outside, Austin wakes with a sound like bees under glass. Mopeds on the main road. A bus sighs at the stop 3 houses down. A mockingbird rehearses 2 songs at once and wins both. I pour water and listen to the bloom of coffee. I hold the paper filter a fraction longer so the drip lines up with the rhythm of my breath. My right ear maps the kitchen. Metal bowl on the counter has moved 2 inches to the left. The edge is cool under my fingers. The fruit bowl smells like the single orange I set there last night. The orange is gone. A lid clicks from the trash and tells me it left in a hurry. Morning is a crime scene if you teach your senses to testify. I live with blindness the way some people live with a river at the end of the street. It is always there. It shapes the route. It offers warnings if you listen. It does not pity you. It does not owe you forgiveness for trying to cross it without respect. When I was a kid, I believed pity was a currency the world spent on boys like me. Then I met a mobility trainer who carried a voice like a steel rail, and he taught me that blindness is a fact, not a personality. I learned to map rooms with my cane and the edge of my shoe. I learned to trust the metronome of traffic more than the smile in a voice. I learned to file time the way some people file photographs. Years later, those lessons will be the nails that hold a roof in place when a storm tries to argue with it. Atlas noses my knee. His breath is bread and rain. I clip his harness, and we walk the path we could do even if the power went out and the city forgot we exist. 3 doors down, Mrs. Alvarez waters a fern, and the stream sounds like relief. She always says good morning with a green hose in her hand and a voice that smells like soap and cinnamon. Across the street, a delivery truck grumbles, and the driver drops a box with more force than a box deserves. Atlas pauses at the corner, where the curb ramp is slightly off level, and then adjusts. He remembers. I remember. The city changes slowly, and then all at once. The trick is to keep the list updated. On the way back, my phone taps my pocket with a message. A short tap. That is a calendar reminder. Studio fundraiser meeting this evening at 7. Camilla asked me to attend with her for show. I asked if the show needed a man who cannot see the slide deck. She laughed and said I could listen to the room and tell her who was lying. She has a talent for placing jokes on the table like candy and then pretending she did not want you to pick them up. I walk home and think about the night 2 years ago when she told me I was brave for calling a car and taking myself to a concert alone. Brave is a word people use when they want to decorate a fact. I like music. I get on stages. I go anyway. The door knows our code. Atlas steps in and shakes, and his collar sings again. I hang the harness on the hook precisely 6 inches to the right of the light switch. The hook is rough under my fingers where I sanded it badly. The sanded spot is now smooth. Someone ran their hand there last night and made friends with it. I stand still and count the seconds until the refrigerator hum shifts. A car passes outside, and the tailpipe tells me it is the silver sedan I have heard pulling up on Tuesdays and Thursdays after 10 for the last month. The neighbors think the driver plays poker with friends on this block. Poker does not smell like Camilla perfume on my pillow when I wake at 2 and put my hand out and find the cold map of her absence. I am not a jealous man. Jealousy is loud and hungry and imprecise. I am a collector of patterns. Camilla married me with the confidence of a woman who believes that love is more beautiful when someone else admires it. Things were good in the beginning. She read books aloud and mispronounced names with a style I learned to love. She squeezed my hand twice when she wanted to say yes in a room where other people spoke, and I could not find the space for my voice. She told friends that we were proof that care beats prediction. She took a job at a yoga studio by the lake and came home smelling like eucalyptus and cashmere and applause. She started staying late for clients who needed private sessions. She started speaking a language made of pauses and careful laughter when she said the name Dean. I met Dean at the lounge where he works. Met is a generous verb. He brushed my arm as if my cane made me hollow and he could pass through without consequence. His voice sat on a bar stool and put its elbows on the counter. Camilla introduced us in a tone that tried normal and did not manage it. He said something about how amazing it is that technology helps people like me get around. People like me is a phrase that carries 100 boxes and none of them fit. I smiled and listed the audio cues in the room like a prayer. Ice in a glass with a crack near the rim. A fan blade with a chip that clicks every third turn. His watch scraped the bar when he leaned closer to her. The scrape was new the next time I heard it. New means it was not an accident. Evidence does not ask you to hate. Evidence asks you to hold it until it tells its own story. I began to collect without telling my hands they were doing that. The smart lock keeps a log. The thermostat keeps a log. The doorbell camera belongs to me and points at the street, not into the home. Sound travels in that space with the honesty of Texas air. I never record private conversations inside the house. I do not need to. The world outside speaks enough. I tag each event with the time. I notice when the same car parks 2 houses down and its passenger door opens with a squeal that suggests a hinge ignored. I notice when the gate latch clicks twice because someone does not yet know our trick for making it behave. I notice the smell on the towels. Bergamot with a synthetic shadow that drugstore bottles love. I buy a strip of scent samples and find the one that matches. It is not in our bathroom cabinet. Atlas begins to alert me to the smell before the car arrives. Dogs track time through noses. He lifts his head and breathes in, and then he lays his chin on my knee. The first week, I think it is a neighbor grilling late. The second week, I follow the smell from the hallway to the laundry room and find towels washed without detergent and dried poorly. The fiber tells the story under my palms, heavier with the ghost of a night that did not involve me. I do not confront Camilla. Confrontation is a performance that costs the performer more than the audience. I call our bank and set alerts on the joint card for charges at the lounge and at the hotel near the lake. I call the HOA office and request copies of overnight noise complaints for the last month. I am polite. Polite unlocks drawers, A friend at the city office sends a link to the online system for requesting a copy of footage from the camera that watches our corner after a rash of petty break-ins last summer. I do not ask for anything inside a private space. I ask for the 5 minutes where a car parks in the fire lane and a man leans against a light pole and checks his phone and waits for the gate to click. Paperwork is not romantic. It is a steady river that carves rock if you let it keep walking. Camilla begins to use phrases that belong to a play about reinvention. She says we deserve to explore. She says love can evolve. She says marriage is not a cage. She says all this while I chop carrots and teach my hands to keep the tip of the knife on the board because stitches are a loud teacher. I answer with lines that belong to a quieter play. I say we can talk to a counselor. I say I can rearrange my work hours to visit the studio. I say I can listen to her when she uses words like bored and stuck and invisible. She touches my shoulder and calls me good, and then comes home later the next night. I add that to the file. I adjust the Braille labels on the pantry and check them the next morning and find one shifted 1 notch higher. She is looking for snacks she has already found. Or he is. Either way, the shelf tells me someone reached for something in the dark and did not ask the room for permission. I take Atlas for longer routes. We circle the lake and memorize the new path where a tree came down during a storm, and the city crews moved the curb cut. I begin to carry a small digital recorder in my pocket. Not to record others. To record myself right after an event. Time makes memories polite. The recorder catches me the way I am. Breathing hard after taking the stairs because the elevator waited too long. Describing the angle of a smell. Counting the beats of a door knock and matching it to previous knocks stored in a folder in my mind labeled Dean. This is not a spy game. It is an archive. People underestimate the power of a person who knows how to store and name. The first twist arrives as a scent. Atlas stops at the bedroom door at 2 in the morning and lifts his head high and begins the low whine that he reserves for thunderstorms and for nights when sirens pile up on the main road. I sit up and reach for the edge of the bed. The sheets on her side are cool. There is a smell near the nightstand that does not belong to us. Spicy with a cheap sweetness that rides under it like a joke told too long. I stand and walk by feel to the kitchen. A glass sits near the sink and the lip is wet. The rim is smooth except for a small chip that catches a finger. That chip was not there yesterday. The tap runs for a second too long and then stops. The back door clicks twice. A belt buckle does that when people hurry. I count to 10 and then to 20, and then I pick up my phone and speak into the recorder. Time, sound, scent, sequence. I end the note and sleep returns because I instruct it to. The second twist is a schedule. Camilla begins to set her alarm for an hour that makes no sense for yoga clients. She leaves a note about privates near the river. The river does not host privates at midnight. She installs a new app that logs rides and adjusts the notification settings so the pings do not bother a sleeping spouse. Except the app sends a monthly summary to the family email, not the push. The monthly summary arrives at 2 in the afternoon while I am on a call walking a developer through screen reader behavior for a new navigation bar. The summary lists pickups and drop-offs, and half of them end near a side entrance to the lounge. That is the same entrance where the camera caught a man leaning against a light pole. I save the summary. I bring the call back to focus. I tell the developer where to put ARIA labels. I move the day forward. Friends will ask later why I stayed so long. The answer is that damage to dignity should not be treated with a chainsaw when a chisel will do. I did not want to burn the house to the foundation when a good set of papers could repair the beams. I schedule a consultation with a family lawyer named Dana, who speaks like a metronome. She asks for a timeline. I bring her a timeline. She asks for access to the logs mentioned. I provide them. She asks me what I want. I tell her I want the truth written in a way a judge will recognize. I want my house and my dog and my work unbothered. I want my bank account to stop being a faucet anyone can open. And I want my conscience to be able to sleep. She says that is a list a professional can respect. We talk about temporary orders. We talk about constructive trust for money moved under false pretenses. We talk about exclusive use of the residence while the case moves. We talk about how to ensure my lack of sight is not used against me by people who love to pretend. Kind of protection is the same as pity. She writes. I sign. The printer warms the room like a small sun. A third twist comes from the HOA. A neighbor has filed a complaint about late-night noise 2 houses down. The complaint includes a time and a description of a car. The description includes a partial plate number that speaks the same rhythm as the tires on the sedan I have been hearing. The HOA does not care about my marriage. The HOA cares about rules read at meetings by tired people who still believe in them. I ask for copies of all complaints in the last 60 days that include our block and late-night times. There are 4. 2 include a complaint about our back gate being left open. The latch has a voice like a small bird. I recognize it in the audio I've taken while leaving notes to myself near the door. The notes are legal because I am recording only me in my own home as I describe what I heard outside. I add the HOA file to the binder in my head and to the folder on my desk. I breathe and the room stays upright. Camilla begins to talk about money in a way that sounds like a fund drive on public radio. She suggests we invest in a retreat for her studio. She suggests we loan her friend a sum for a pop-up event near the water. She suggests we repair her car with parts that cost more than the car intends to live. I decline politely and repeat the budget. Budgets are the bones of sanity. She calls me ungenerous. I tell her that generosity without structure is a river with no banks. It floods and ruins everything and then asks for applause. She goes quiet for a day and then spends the next week late. I pay the gas bill and pet the dog and press my face to the cool window and lay my cheek against the whispered world. One Friday, I travel to a client office downtown to audit their new release. I move through the building with Atlas and a handler from the front desk who has learned the rhythm of my stride. The smell of new carpet is arrogant. Conference rooms cough out air like bored lungs. I sit in a chair that imagines itself expensive. And I read the web through my reader and make notes on a key travel path that will fail if a user moves too fast. The release manager thanks me, and I leave with a tote bag that wants to be remembered. Outside the building, I pause. The heat at street level has changed. A storm is approaching. The air tastes like metal and lake. I call Dana and ask her to file the first set of papers. My voice does not shake. She says, today will do. I say, today will do fine. Night arrives like a door closing. Camilla returns after midnight. Atlas lifts his head and does not thump his tail. She walks into the room with a softness that imitates courtesy. Her keys fall to the dish with a tone a little higher than last week because a second key has been added. I can hear the ghost ring. She smells like yoga mat cleaner and like an ending. I say her name. She stands at the doorway. I ask if she wants to talk in the morning. She says we can talk now. I tell her we will talk after she reads a letter that will arrive later today. I tell her that we will keep our voices low because walls are good citizens and do not deserve to be witnesses to a war. She says I am being dramatic. I say I am being organized. She sleeps on the couch without asking. In the morning, she puts coffee in the wrong mug, and I do not correct her. Dana serves the papers on a Tuesday at noon. Camilla texts to ask if this is a joke. I tell her there was no joke in our house last night, and there will not be one today. She calls me a monster. I say nothing. She calls my mother. My mother calls me and asks if I'm sure. I tell her that sure is not a feeling. Sure is a stack of logs and a map. She sighs. She says that when I was a boy, I would sit on the porch and listen to the road and tell her which neighbor was coming before they turned the corner. She says she should have known I would do something patient about this. Patient is the word I can live with. Dean makes the mistake that people like him always make. He writes an email to a co-worker about a staff schedule change and boasts in a sentence without punctuation that he has found a way to be happy. The co-worker forwards the email to the owner because the owner does not like staff who find happiness at work during hours not scheduled for such. The owner calls a meeting. The meeting invites a printout of expenses labeled staff morale and finds 3 receipts in a row that match dates and times when my logs sing sad songs. The owner sends a letter to HR and to the city license office because loud bars must please many gods. I receive a copy of nothing because none of that involves me yet. Dana receives a copy because she asked for it in language so polite it opened a door on the first knock. The HOA schedules a meeting to address noise, parking, and an upcoming neighborhood block party. I add the date to my calendar and call the chair to request the agenda in a format accessible to my tools. The chair is a teacher who has already met the war between visibility and function. She sends me a clean text file. She asks if I will speak regarding the late-night complaints. I say I will attend and answer questions about times and patterns. She thanks me. I hang up and pet Atlas until his breath anchors mine. The day of the meeting, the air smells like old rain. We sit on folding chairs in the room near the pool where the echo is friendly. I listen to the names of neighbors I know by footsteps and garage door songs. The chair calls the meeting to order, and the room obeys in a way that makes me smile. Small democracies are the proof that civilization still wants to live. Midway through the agenda, the late-night noise item arrives. The chair asks for comments. A man who loves his truck more than his wife complains about music after midnight. A woman who runs with a headlamp at 4 in the morning says she worries about strangers in parked cars. The chair asks me to summarize the pattern I have observed. I stand. I describe the times without names. I describe the car door sequence. I describe the gate latch and the hinge with the squeal. I describe nothing that invades a private space. I keep my sentences short and my breath calm. The room listens. Camilla is not there. Dean is not there. That is good. I am not hunting applause. I am building a floor on which other people will choose to stand. After the meeting, a man in a security uniform approaches and clears his throat in the formal way people do when they are about to hand you something wrapped in paper consequence. He says he is a process server. He asks my name. He tells me he has documents for Camilla and for Dean prepared by Dana and filed with the court. He asks if I know where to find them. I give him the studio address and the lounge address and the hours that make a safe bet. He thanks me and leaves with footsteps that did not want to meet this story, but accept their role. I walk home with Atlas and feel the city lean into the first true cool of the season. The stars will not be bright, but the air will pretend. I sit on the porch and listen to my phone buzz with the live updates from the delivery of reality. The studio refuses service inside the lobby. The server waits outside with a patience that belongs to people who respect rules. Camilla steps out. Paper meets hand. No voice raised. The lounge receives its own delivery. Dean signs. The night does not break. Inside my chest, something unclenches that had been pretending to be part of my spine. The next morning, the house is half full of the vibration that follows impact. Camilla knocks on the door and enters when I say yes. She says that I disgust her. I say that disgust is a storm cloud and will pass. She calls me cruel. I say that cruelty would have been shouting for an audience or setting traps that do not honor the law. I say that I have done neither. I say that the court will decide what lives where and who pays for what, and that I will abide that decision. She says I can keep the dog and the house can rot. I smile because the dog already knows how to read the weather, and the house does not rot when you descale the kettle and oil the hinge and pay the HOA fee on time. She stands in the doorway and breathes with fury, and then leaves. Atlas licks my hand, and then lies down. Duty done. Donna secures temporary orders within a week. The judge grants me exclusive use of the residence while proceedings continue. The judge tells both parties not to remove funds from joint accounts beyond ordinary living expenses. The judge asks for civility framed as rules. The judge schedules discovery. The judge thanks us for keeping voices steady. I step out of the courtroom with the odd high that comes when a system chooses not to mock you today. The air tastes like copy paper and old wood. I text my mother to say the weekend will remain as planned. She sends back one word. Good. The word lands like a chair placed where you needed it. I change the door code after notifying Dana. I move Camilla clothes into 2 boxes and label them with Braille dots so my hands will not be startled later. I keep her books on the shelf because paper deserves mercy. I wash the sheets twice. I replace the filter in the vacuum. I set a pot of beans to soak, and the kitchen smells like a future that forgives. I sit at the table, and I write a list of house tasks for the next month. Air filters, gutter clean, Atlas checkup, oil for the hinge. The list is a poem that does not bother anyone. Dean tries to call. I let the call die and send the number to Dana. He sends a message that reads like a confession performed by someone who has never confessed. He blames temptation. He blames the city. He blames the studio. He blames the hours. He blames the moon. He does not mention my name. I think about names while I wash the dishes. Names are contracts. Some hold. Some need to be torn carefully, so the paper can be recycled into something more useful. The lounge conducts its own review. Expense reports prove to be useful operas. The accountant finds a trip to San Antonio labeled Vendor Outreach that was in truth a night at a hotel with a rooftop pool and a bar bill that could rent a small apartment for a month. The owner suspends Dean and files a complaint with the company that handles their credit lines. I learn this not from gossip, but because a letter arrives addressed to Camilla about an investigation into misuse of funds by an associate. Dana adds it to her file. The file has begun to feel like a forest. The trees stand in order and raise their branches and form a roof that holds shade. Under that shade, my mind can do work without burning. There are days when loneliness arrives without knocking. I eat at the counter, and the other bar stool looks like a question. I resist the urge to narrate the question into the recorder. Not every silence needs a caption. I call a friend, and we talk about the new train line that will one day connect nothing to another, nothing but make people feel like the city is listening. I pet Atlas, and he complains like an old man when I move my hand to the wrong ear. I listen to a record that uses brushes on a snare, and the sound sends my blood into a walk instead of a sprint. I sleep. Discovery arrives with a cart. Dana sets boxes on my table, and we make a grid with files and tags. Messages printed by a compliance system that does not mind being disliked. Screenshots of calendars with private sessions that overlap with bar hours. Receipts that speak in the clipped tone of thermal printers. A note in Camilla hand that says, "Remember to bring scarf to the lake" on the night the gate latch complained. And the doorbell camera watched a man lean against the light pole. Donna reads with a memory that frightens nonsense. She arranges the papers into 3 piles. Timeline, finance, community. She laughs quietly at the word community, because nothing breaks a word faster than misuse. We sit through a session with a mediator who believes in sentences that start with "I feel." I feel like honesty is a room with windows that open. Camilla says she felt ignored. Camilla says she wanted to be seen. Camilla says blindness is a lot for a person to carry. I sit still and let the word blindness land like rain on my jacket. The mediator asks me to respond. I say that marriages fail when attention becomes a currency you can spend on someone else and still expect returns at home. I say I am open to the idea that my routine left little room for surprise. I say I will not pretend that routine caused deceit. The mediator thanks me for a sentence that did not spit. Dana rests a fingertip on the table twice. A private bell I have learned to treat as praise. We reach terms for temporary support and a schedule for dividing weekends. Camilla insists on keeping the studio fundraiser on the calendar. I do not attend. The night of the event, the house feels clean as a bowl. I sit on the porch and listen to the laughter spill from cars when guests return to their exteriors. At 11, a sedan slows near our block and then decides to keep moving. Atlas stands and watches the street with the interest of a guard who has decided to be gentle. I scratch his head and tell him he is a good citizen. He yawns and leans into my leg with a weight that says he believes me. The day the judge signs the order for exclusive use feels like a locksmith arrived to bless the present. I change the code again and send the new number to Dana and to my mother. I buy a new kettle and throw out the one that formed scale like a habit. I oil the hinge. I label 2 more drawers with Braille so my hands can find what they need at night without asking the dark to help. I wash the baseboards because they hold the story of shoes and paws that walked through here while the house and I were busy managing a crisis. I light a candle that smells like clean cotton and not like someone else's memory. I do not date. People ask if I will ever. I say that my heart is union labor and has negotiated a rest. I say that eventually an orchestra will tune in a room that fits 2, and we will see. For now I have Atlas and a city that sings if you show up early and listen to its sound check. I have a job that likes my ears. I have neighbors who loan sugar and do not introduce me to their cousins as a project. I have a mother who tells me about the shows she watches as if her son could see them, and I like that she forgets. I have my own shows. The kettle and the hinge and the hum and the pipe click. It is a good program. When the final mediation arrives, the room feels warmer. The terms are the terms. Camilla keeps her car and her studio schedule. I keep the house and Atlas and the accounts that pay for electricity and flour and dog checks. There is a clause about non-disparagement because the internet does not need more fuel. There is a clause about returning items that do not belong to the person in possession. There is a clause about not moving out of the county with the dog without notifying the other. I sign. She signs. The mediator smiles in a way that people who clean rooms smile when they turn back the covers and see the bed will be slept in later by someone who will respect it. Dean is no longer at the lounge. I hear his name once in a conversation at the market between 2 women whose shoes tell me they like Pilates and do not believe in cash. They say he moved to another city. I wish that city patience. Camilla opens a new class series that focuses on breath and renewal. I hope she learns to breathe around an absence that she helped create and to renew without stealing air from another. I do not wish her harm. Harm costs everyone. I wish her a life where she does not need to elbow anyone else off a stage to feel like she is in the light. The night settles into a new routine. I cook beans with cumin and salt that tastes like a memory. I toast tortillas until they spot like a map. I set a plate for me and a bowl for Atlas that holds his food like a promise kept. We eat. We sit on the porch. The train a mile away sings its long line through the dark. The wind lifts the leaves and makes a sound like someone you trust turning a page. I think about the day she tapped my cane when we first met and said something about courage dressed as inconvenience. I think about the day she pronounced us a team. I think about the day she took off her ring in the bathroom and placed it on the counter with a click too loud for a thing that small. I think about how sound is the first honest thing in a room. I let the sounds of this room testify for me now. I sleep and the house holds. Weeks pass and the order becomes part of the air. I update the labels on the pantry because a new bag of rice deserves a home that remembers it. I replace the filter in the air conditioner, and the hum returns to a pitch that promises efficiency. I sand the rough spot on the harness hook, and it bites less when my hand finds it in the morning rush. I rehang a painting a friend made and make sure the level bubble rests where it belongs by touching the frame corner to the mark I carved into the wall when we moved in. The mark is mine, and it tells me the frame is straight. Sight does not own measurement. A message arrives from the HOA, thanking residents for improvements in late-night noise. The letter sounds surprised and happy in equal measure. I smile and set it under a magnet on the fridge, and the magnet reminds my fingers of a vacation with my mother years ago when we bought it from a man who painted with a palette knife and a cigarette he never lit. I call my mother and tell her the block party is back on. She says she will bring corn salad and a story about the time I held my breath underwater longer than any cousin. I let her keep the story. She has rights to her own archive. The last day of court is not cinematic. The judge reads and signs. The clerk stamps. Dana shakes my hand and says that my file was a joy because nothing in it screamed. I tell her I am grateful for a professional who respects gravity. We part on the steps under an unremarkable sky. I take Atlas for a long walk along the path where the wind plays a metal fence like a harp. He sniffs the world with the care of a curator. I think about what revenge means and decide again that it is the wrong word. This was a reclamation of space, of schedule, of self-respect. The loud versions of this story end in flames. My version ends in a kitchen that knows my hands and an air vent that sings true. I am not naive. People will hurt me again in smaller ways, and perhaps in large ones. The world is not a contract that keeps its terms forever. But I have structure. And structure gives a blind man far more than pity ever could. It gives him roots and habits, and the ability to change course without losing the thread. It gives him a way to tell the truth without leaning on rage for volume. It gives him a home where the first honest thing in a room speaks and he knows how to listen. Tonight, I place my hand on the doorframe and feel the paint cool and the wood steady. I call Atlas and he comes with a jingle and a yawn. We step into the night and the night steps aside. The sidewalk remembers our feet. The street remembers our patience. The city speaks in tires and wind and distant voices and the crisp click of a signal at the crosswalk. I walk forward with a cane tapping time and a dog who knows the route and a heart that has learned to tell time by the sound of the kettle and the house and the hinge. I walk forward. The room will be waiting. The honest sounds will tell me the state of things. I will answer by keeping the roof in place and the list current and the door latch oiled and the coffee measured right. That is my ending. That is my beginning. That is my life. Spring eased over Austin, and the air began to taste like limestone and new leaves. The house kept its honest music. The hinge sighed, and the kettle breathed, and the vent stitched the morning with its soft thread. I woke without hurry and let the day form around the small tasks that keep a roof loyal. Atlas stretched and set his chin on my knee, and the collar tag gave us the beat we needed to start. The orders became a floor that did not wobble. The bank learned my name for the right reasons, and the court faded from the calendar like a season that had done its job. I kept the same discipline that saved me, and I let it be gentle. Files slept in a drawer. Alerts spoke only when numbers crossed lines. Proof existed without noise, and that quiet left room for food that forgives and sleep that keeps its word. Work trusted my ears again. I read a new build and told a room where its paths would trip a user who moves fast and thinks faster. The room listened and moved code until it held. At lunch, I walked the block and then counted buses by rhythm and brakes. A child laughed at a dog who wanted to be a train, and the laugh sounded like a note a trumpet would ask for at dusk. I carried that sound home like a receipt for a good hour Braille kept to the schedule like a citizen. Calls began on time and ended on time. When she needed a change, she asked and respected the answer. We spoke about school and the silly pride a child keeps for a paper crown, and we did not rehearse the past. Decency stood where drama used to posture, and the rooms grew taller. Dean was gone from the lounge, and the city filed his name under weather. I wished him patience in some other place, and then stopped wishing anything for him at all. Camilla filled her hours with work that did not lean on my door. I wished her steadiness the way you wish safety on a road you no longer drive. Then I turned to the road that remains mine. On a clear Saturday atlas, and I walked the trail before the sun found its full voice. The metal fence played its long harp line, and a freight train wrote slow punctuation across the far end of the park. At the water I could smell a boat that had learned its route so well, it barely needed a hand on the wheel. I like that kind of knowledge. Quiet and earned and uninterested in applause. A letter from the HOA thanked the block for the calm that had returned. I tucked it under a magnet and then called my mother so she could laugh. When I told her that form letters sometimes sound like hymns if you hold them at the right angle. She told me the date for the block party and promised a bowl of corn salad that never lasts. I wrote it on the board, and the chalk felt like a contract I could keep. There were still hours that arrived with a long shadow. On those nights, I cooked beans low and steady and let cumin and salt stand in for speeches. I cleaned the counter until the lights slid without snagging. I wrote a single line in the small book that holds only the truth that matters. Held steady. Then I slept, because morning earns nothing from worry and everything from rest. The fun meeting happened at a long table that remembers other hands. We read applications aloud and paused for names that could carry a future if given a small push. A check traveled across town and came back months later as a note about a certificate pinned to a wall. Another check bought boots for work that respects water. None of it was glamorous. All of it was real. That is the currency I believe in. I learned to enjoy simple routes again. Market to home, home to lake, lake to porch. I counted the steps and the small changes the city makes when it thinks no one pays attention. A new crack where heat fought concrete and won. A mailbox screw that forgot its job and rattled until a hand convinced it to behave. A neighbor who switched shoes and began to walk lighter. The world leaves clues when it improves. A final order arrived with a stamp that sounded like a lid closing on a jar. I scanned and filed, and then made dinner. The room did not ask for a speech. It asked for onions and patience and flame at the right height. After dishes, I sat on the porch with Atlas at my feet and listened to the night carry voices home. The fence hummed a low line, and the street settled into a key I have known since I was a boy. If a stranger asks what justice looked like, I will point to this quiet. A house that holds. Accounts that do not leak. Work that respects a mind that listens well. A dog that knows the route, and a man who knows his own step. The story people wanted me to tell would have ended in bright noise and smoke. Mine ends in a kitchen where the kettle does not lie, and a door that closes with a soft, honest click. Summer will come, and the heat will carry its old argument down our street. I will oil the latch before it complains and label the new drawer so my hand can find the right tool in the dark. Atlas will sleep and twitch at the dream of some rabbit who thinks speed can outrun sense. The city will speak in tires and wind and signals, and I will answer by keeping faith with the small work that guards a life. Tonight, I will set the cane by the door and line up shoes that prefer to wander. I will grind beans and measure water and teach the kettle to sing at the right moment. I will run a finger along the frame and thank the paint for staying where it should. I will sit and listen, and the room will testify like it always has. The first honest thing in any room is still sound. I know what it says, and I know how to answer.